When the eyes deceive you, when the words sound beautiful, when the actions seem harmless, there is still one thing that remains uncorrupted. It is the truth behind the energy a person carries. In a world full of masks and performances, understand this deeply. Energy never lies. You must learn to feel before you listen, before you analyze someone's behavior. Learn to observe how their presence shifts your inner space. There are individuals whose words are kind, whose smiles are warm, whose gestures are socially acceptable, and yet something feels off. Something in your gut whispers caution. That is the first and most ancient alarm system, the wisdom of your inner sense. You see, energy has no costume. It cannot pretend for too long. It does not wear perfume. It does not know how to lie. It simply radiates what it is. And when someone carries darkness within them, even when they try to present light, there will be a disturbance, a restlessness that you feel in your chest, in your breath, in your emotional rhythm. Some people carry an energy that dries the soul. You were laughing before they came into the room, but now you're doubting yourself. You had clarity before you spoke to them, but now you are confused. You were healing, growing, breathing freely, and then they arrived, and suddenly your progress feels invalid, your confidence questioned, your light dimmed. That is not coincidence, that is not imagination, that is the residue of their spiritual weight rubbing off onto yours. Words can be rehearsed, actions can be manipulated, smiles can be counterfeit, but energy is the essence of a being, and it echoes the truth of their spiritual alignment. A person can tell you they love you while secretly envying your light. A person can show up for you in public while cursing you in their private heart. Energy does not need translation. It is the soul's language. And your spirit, when uncluttered by noise, always understands it. The mind will argue, the emotions will get attached, the ego will want to prove loyalty, but silence will reveal what logic cannot. Sit with someone in silence and observe how your spirit reacts. Does their presence make your thoughts calm or chaotic? Do you feel more alive or more drained after being with them? Do they leave you with clarity or confusion? These are not shallow indicators. They are signals, sacred signals. Often, the demons we encounter do not enter with fire and smoke. They arrive with compliments. They make promises. They wear the face of the familiar. And yet, their energy leaves a trail of inner destruction. You are not imagining it when you feel tension around them. You are not being too sensitive when you notice your peace disappearing. You are simply awake. You are simply perceiving what most choose to ignore. There are people who do not want you to rise. Not openly, but silently. They smile when you speak of your dreams, but inside they hope you fail. They offer help, but their help carries hooks. Their energy does not celebrate your light, it competes with it. They don't protect your spirit, they feed on it. And you can only detect them when you stop listening to their words and start feeling their essence. Awareness is not paranoia. Sensitivity is not weakness. Spiritual intuition is not superstition. It is survival. You are not being called to judge others, but to discern what you allow into your sacred space. You owe no one access to your soul's peace. You owe no explanation for trusting your inner knowing. Because energy, pure, raw, honest energy, never lies. When you make space for silence, you will see clearly. When you stop rushing to fix, to please, to explain, you will begin to recognize the invisible threads that either nourish or choke your spirit. And when you walk into a room and feel the atmosphere shift, do not dismiss it. There is no greater teacher than energy. It is the voice behind the words, the shadow behind the smile, the truth behind the mask. It speaks, always. Whether we are brave enough to listen is the real question. There is a form of darkness that does not roar, does not strike loudly, does not come in storms. It comes quietly. It seeps into conversations. It hides behind jokes. It wraps itself in concern, and yet its nature is parasitic. This is the darkness of consistent manipulation. It begins subtly. A friend or family member questions your memory. That's not what I said, they insist, when you know exactly what was spoken. You're being too sensitive, they tell you, when you express that something hurt. You always overreact, they repeat, whenever you try to address a boundary. And over time, something begins to shift, not in them, but in you. You begin to question yourself. You replay situations in your mind, not once, but over and over. You apologize more often, even when you're not sure what you did. You seek their validation, as though without it, your own sense of truth is incomplete. This is no coincidence. This is no accident. It is the slow erosion of your inner compass by someone who thrives on control, not connection. A manipulator does not need power in obvious ways. They don't raise their voice. They lower your confidence. They don't chain your body. They weaken your belief in your own perception. Manipulation is a spiritual poison. It does not aim to destroy you in one moment. It aims to reshape how you see yourself so that you become easier to control, easier to dominate, easier to silence. If you observe closely, you will notice the pattern. They twist every disagreement so they become the victim. They turn every conversation back to your flaws. They plant doubt in the form of concern. I just worry about the choices you're making. They blur truth with lies so skillfully that after some time, even the strongest minds start to question their own eyes. This is not just a psychological game, it is a spiritual drain, because manipulation is not about winning a discussion, it is about feeding the ego by shrinking the other person's light. When someone repeatedly diminishes your intuition, when they consistently make you feel guilty for having needs, when they sabotage your growth while pretending to support it, this is not love. This is spiritual warfare in disguise. And the most dangerous manipulators are not loud. They are calculated. They may never insult you openly, but they will constantly suggest that you are less capable, less balanced, less intelligent, less worthy of clarity. They do this so that your dependence on them grows and your trust in yourself fades. You see, if you stop trusting your own decisions, you will rely on theirs. That is how they gain power. Watch for repetition. Manipulation is not a one-time slip. It is a pattern. Do they always deflect responsibility? Do they turn their apologies into weapons? I said I was sorry. What more do you want from me? Do they apologize only when it benefits them? Do they use your vulnerability against you later? Do they create confusion rather than resolution after every conflict? A true companion listens to understand. A manipulator listens to find leverage. A true friend holds space for your emotions. A manipulator uses your emotions to guilt or control you. A loving presence empowers you to think clearly, act freely, and feel safe in your own truth. Manipulative presence forces you to shrink yourself to preserve the peace. That is not harmony, that is silent control. The key is not to react with anger or resistance. The key is awareness. When you become aware of the pattern, the spell begins to break. When you see it for what it is, not love, not care, not confusion, but consistent manipulation, you reclaim your mind. And when the mind is clear, the spirit can no longer be caged. Observe how often you feel the need to defend yourself around them. Pay attention to how much energy you spend explaining your intentions. Reflect on how often you feel emotionally exhausted after speaking with them. These are not minor details. These are signs. The signs do not scream, they whisper. And they whisper until you are ready to listen. Not all darkness appears as chaos. Some darkness simply feels like emptiness. It does not come with noise, but with absence. It is not loud, but void. The most dangerous presence is not always the one that attacks you, but the one that slowly disconnects you from your inner light. There are people whose spirits no longer reach toward the light. They have chosen bitterness over growth, pride over humility, and control over connection. When such individuals walk into your life, their influence is not always direct or obvious. Sometimes it feels like nothing at all, until you begin to notice that your inner fire is not as strong as it used to be. The light within you is your connection to truth, peace, compassion, clarity. It is the pulse of your soul that tells you what feels aligned, what feels right, what brings meaning to your existence. But when you are surrounded by those who are disconnected from their own light, you begin to dim. Not because your light is broken, but because you are being smothered by shadows that do not belong to you. These people often walk around with empty eyes. You'll notice it not in what they say, but in what they don't feel. You'll share your joy and they respond with cold politeness. You'll express your pain and they respond with silence, or worse, indifference. They will never meet you in your emotional depth, because to meet you there would require them to be in touch with something they've long buried. When a soul is disconnected from the light, empathy disappears. Gratitude becomes impossible. Every situation is filtered through a lens of cynicism and resentment. They cannot celebrate others because they are too busy counting what life has denied them. They cannot give freely because they live in emotional scarcity. They cannot speak life into you because they are spiritually numb themselves. Over time, being close to such people feels like walking through a spiritual fog. You don't know exactly what's wrong, but something feels off. You feel emotionally flat. You begin to question your own excitement, your own visions, your own desires. Your spirit, which once soared, now settles. And the more time you spend with those disconnected from the light, the more your own light begins to flicker. You start to withdraw from what you love. You stop sharing your dreams. You censor your joy. You minimize your truth. And slowly, your inner world begins to mirror theirs, not because you have lost your path, but because you've allowed someone into your space who cannot walk in the sun and resents those who do. These individuals do not always intend to bring you down, but they live in darkness, and darkness does not tolerate light without trying to dim it. A disconnected soul cannot celebrate your healing. They cannot understand your compassion. They do not see your peace as strength. They see it as weakness. Your ability to forgive threatens them. Your capacity to rise unsettles them. Your resilience shines a mirror to their spiritual absence. And so they respond not with kindness, but criticism. Not with curiosity, but contempt. They question your beliefs. They mock your optimism. They try to reduce your purpose to fantasy. And if you are not careful, you will begin to internalize their emptiness as your truth. You must understand this deeply. The light within you is sacred. It is not meant to be explained to those who refuse to see. It is not your duty to convince someone of their own blindness. It is your duty to protect your vision, because light cannot thrive in an environment that constantly demands its dimming. When someone is disconnected from the light, their presence becomes spiritually cold. You do not feel seen, only watched. You do not feel heard, only scanned. You do not feel safe, only tolerated. The warmth that normally flows from soul to soul is absent. In its place, you feel a hollow stillness that does not nurture, does not inspire, does not support. It simply takes up space while slowly draining your own vitality. Pay close attention to how people respond to your light. Not your success, not your status, but your spirit. Do they soften around your presence or harden? Do they lift you or do they linger with indifference? Are they rooting for your expansion or are they silently hoping you'll shrink? When a person is disconnected from the light, they will never protect yours. Charm is a powerful force. It is elegant, attractive, and carefully crafted. It draws people in with words that feel smooth, gestures that feel warm, and attention that feels genuine. But charm, when used by someone disconnected from truth, becomes a mask. And the danger of this mask is that it fools the eyes, seduces the mind, and quiets the intuition. There are people in this world who have mastered the art of appearing kind. They know how to smile at the right moment, how to compliment just enough to gain your trust, how to speak with softness while hiding intentions soaked in manipulation. They study your needs, your weaknesses, your insecurities, not to help you grow, but to learn how to control and access your emotional gates. These people do not show you their truth. They show you what you want to see. And in those first few encounters, their presence may feel like comfort, like safety, even like love. But what you must understand is that truth is never fully revealed in moments. It is always revealed in patterns. One act of kindness does not define a kind person. One emotional gesture does not make someone emotionally intelligent. One honest conversation does not make someone trustworthy. Real character is not seen in what someone does once. It is found in what they do consistently. This is why it is dangerous to judge others by moments, because charm is not a reflection of integrity. It is often a practiced performance. Those who are skilled at manipulation know how to play roles. They wear empathy like clothing. They speak of growth without embodying it. They repeat spiritual phrases, motivational language, or emotional buzzwords, not because they live them, but because they know those words open doors into your life. If you only pay attention to how someone behaves when they want something, you will always be deceived. Watch how they act when there's nothing to gain. Watch how they respond when you set boundaries. Watch how they speak about others when those people are not present. Watch how they react to your success, your healing, your self-respect. These are the cracks where truth escapes and illusion fades. A person's pattern is the echo of their inner world. If they always play the victim, even when they are the cause of harm, that is not coincidence. It is a pattern. If they show deep affection when they fear losing you, but go cold once they feel secure again, that is not passion, it is control. If they build emotional closeness quickly but disappear when accountability appears, that is not vulnerability, it is performance. Charm alone is meaningless without consistency. Someone who genuinely cares will not only speak lovingly in the sunshine, they will show up with the same care in the storm. They will not only be generous when praised, they will give even when no one is watching. They will not only support you when you are low, they will celebrate you when you rise. This is how you know the presence is real, by the rhythm, not the highlight. We live in a time where image is worshipped, where appearance replaces essence, where charisma is confused for character. But you must develop the ability to see beyond performance. Let the passage of time reveal people, because while charm may convince the world, it cannot maintain a false image forever. Patterns always surface. Repetition always exposes truth. You must train your awareness to observe the rhythm of people, not the spikes. One kind word, one generous act, one emotional conversation. These do not define a person. What defines them is who they are in silence, in consistency, in the space between applause and attention. If their kindness disappears when challenged, it was never real. If their presence fades when your truth grows stronger, it was never grounded in love. And if their support only exists when they benefit, it was never support, it was self-interest in disguise. There are those who wear charm like a tool. They sharpen it to cut through your defenses. They polish it to blind you from their darkness. And they adjust it based on who they're with, like a costume that changes for every audience. But your spirit must learn to listen beyond the tone, beyond the smile, beyond the well-timed gesture. It must pay attention to repetition, to reaction, to rhythm. Because charm without depth is a mask, and patterns, not moments, reveal the soul behind it. When true strength walks into the room, it brings people together. It encourages harmony, it nourishes trust. It allows others to breathe, to speak freely, to feel safe in their truth. But where there is spiritual corruption, the opposite happens. The atmosphere becomes heavier. Tension begins to brew. Connections that once felt secure start to weaken. And where once there was unity, now there is division. There is often a tendency in the name of division. Demons do not always appear as violent or aggressive. Often they work silently. Their goal is not just to destroy one person, but to fracture the entire structure of love that surrounds them. They do this not with open war, but with whispered chaos. They divide by spreading confusion. They divide by turning people against each other. They divide by inserting doubt, jealousy, resentment, and mistrust. drop by drop, until bonds that once felt sacred begin to crack without a visible cause. You must learn to recognize the subtle hand behind the disorder. Not everyone who smiles in front of you celebrates you behind your back. Not everyone who listens to your pain holds it with compassion. Some listen to gather ammunition. Some pretend to support only to plant seeds of conflict later. And slowly, the relationships around you begin to feel unstable. Not because something is wrong with the bond, but because something external has been feeding poison into it. The energy of division is not hard to identify once you step back and observe patterns. Think carefully. Before this person entered the space, how did people relate to one another? Were you grounded in your friendships? Was your family more connected? Were your relationships built on trust? And since their arrival, what has changed? People carrying dark intentions thrive in environments of instability. They are uncomfortable with peace because peace requires truth, and truth exposes manipulation. So instead, they stir unrest. They play both sides in a conflict. They tell you what you want to hear, then tell someone else something completely different. They feed drama, then pretend to be the solution. They light the fire, then act like the firefighter. And in doing so, they appear necessary. They make themselves feel important by being in the center of the chaos they created. This is the hallmark of a divisive presence. They are always involved in tension, but never seem to take responsibility for it. Somehow, they are always the victim, always misunderstood, always just trying to help. But if you look closely, you'll see that where they walk, relationships suffer, connections break, love is questioned, peace is replaced with gossip, doubt, and emotional exhaustion. Do not be fooled by kindness that comes with strings attached. Do not be impressed by someone who seems to know everything about everyone. Do not trust those who constantly bring problems but never solutions, who point fingers but never reflect, who claim loyalty but cannot stand to see others thrive in unity. Because true strength unites, true love protects, true presence nurtures peace. Divisive energy isolates people. It makes you question those you once trusted. It turns your attention towards small things, petty comparisons, subtle resentments. And while you are busy defending yourself, repairing damage, or clearing misunderstandings, the one who caused the fracture quietly watches, satisfied with the disruption. This is how demons operate. Not through fear alone, but through fragmentation. They do not need to attack you directly. They only need to disconnect you from those who uplift you. Once you are isolated, you are easier to influence, easier to manipulate, easier to break. And that is always the goal. To cut the cords that tie you to truth, to compassion, to clarity. Ask yourself, who in your life stirs more conflict than calm? Who constantly puts people in opposition with one another? Who thrives when there is drama, but disappears when there is peace? Who always manages to shift blame, always has a new story, always plays a different role, depending on who is present? These are not random personality traits. These are the fingerprints of a spirit that is not at peace and does not want anyone else to be either. Protect your relationships by protecting your environment. When someone brings division, it does not matter how charming they are, how close they once were, or how subtle their influence is. What matters is the result of their presence. If it consistently results in tension, suspicion, and separation, then you are not dealing with a misunderstanding. You are dealing with spiritual misalignment masquerading as friendship. Because demons do not build, they break. They do not connect, they separate. They do not unite, they divide. True connection does not make you shrink, it expands you. It invites you to breathe deeper, stand taller, speak more clearly. When someone is aligned with your spirit, their presence feels like permission. Permission to be real, to be seen, to be honest. But when the energy is dark, when it carries hidden agendas, unresolved pain, or demonic intention, it does not give you wings. It changes your voice. It does not make you feel alive. It makes you afraid to be who you are. The most telling sign of spiritual darkness is the presence of fear. Not fear that protects, but fear that controls. There is a difference between being challenged and being suppressed. A loving presence may confront you, may correct you, but it never seeks to silence your essence. A dark presence does not empower, it suffocates. You begin to censor your thoughts, walk on emotional eggshells, minimize your truth just to keep the peace. Ask yourself, why do I feel smaller around this person? Why do I hesitate to express joy or speak of growth or assert boundaries? Why do I feel like I am always bracing for criticism, withdrawal, or emotional punishment? If the answer is not love, it is fear. And fear is not the fruit of a healthy connection. It is a signal that something sacred is being violated in silence. When you are in the presence of someone who carries this spiritual poison, you will notice a quiet erosion of your personal power. You start doubting your decisions. You wait for their approval before moving forward. You filter your words to avoid triggering their insecurity or anger. You internalize their moods and make their emotional state your responsibility. This is not care, it is captivity. Fear-based control does not always look like aggression. Often it wears the face of concern. I'm only saying this because I care about you. But their care always comes with a condition. Obey, comply, conform. And if you don't, they punish you with silence, withdrawal, shame, or passive aggression. Over time, you begin to lose your voice, not because it's gone, but because you've been taught it's not safe to use. Freedom in a relationship is not the absence of challenge. It is the presence of safety. A safe connection does not demand perfection. It allows mistakes, it invites questions, it welcomes differences. But when fear is present, freedom dies. Your inner compass stops working because someone else has slowly replaced your sense of self with their own narrative. You no longer ask, is this right for me? You ask, will they be okay with this? This is how darkness spreads, not always with threats, but with subtle spiritual dominance. You begin to trade authenticity for approval. You begin to wear masks, not to protect yourself from the world, but to survive within your own relationships. And the most tragic part is, you begin to believe this is love. But love does not silence, it listens. Love does not control, it respects. Love does not intimidate, it invites. Spiritual freedom is not a luxury. It is your natural state. You are not born to walk in fear of rejection, to calculate every word, to shapeshift your identity just to be accepted. The presence of fear is the clearest indicator that something is wrong, not just emotionally, but energetically. When someone carries unresolved wounds, unhealed darkness, or demonic energy, they will not seek connection, they will seek control. And control always breeds fear, not the kind that keeps you safe, but the kind that keeps you silent. You will fear their moods, their opinions, their judgments. You will avoid being too happy, too bold, too ambitious, because your expansion threatens their sense of dominance. You will feel like your spirit must become smaller so they can feel big enough to stay. Your soul was never meant to exist in a space where it must shrink in order to feel safe. Real connection is freedom. Real love makes space for your light. Real presence allows you to evolve without fear of abandonment or punishment. But when the energy is dark, it will always remind you, directly or indirectly, that you are only welcome if you remain who they want you to be. This is the root of fear-based presence. Not love, but control dressed in familiar clothing.